on January the 10th, I had to look at the date. Uh, VA come out with an interim final rule, which means it's a new regulation that's that although it's complying with some of the notice and comment, it's not on hold for 60 days pending the notice and comment. In other words, it's effective when it's published. That's basically what an interim final rule is. Um, and so this rule, obviously, because the PACT Act, if you back up a little bit, created presumptions of exposure to all kinds of things in the Gulf War, in Iraq, Afghanistan. Did a lot of good stuff. All right. Um, there was a group that it did help, but didn't help as much as it should have. Uh, a group that served in a base called K2 in Uzbekistan early on in the war in Afghanistan. It's around 2001. So, we're talking 20 something years ago, 23, 24 years ago. Uh, early on in the war, there was a base called K2 is what is kind of what we call it. There's a much larger name for it. It was an old Russian base. Um, and that's where some of our initial sort of high-speed troops were deployed to. That base turned out to be rather toxic, um,
Rather.
very toxic, uh, very toxic. Uh, the government has not owned up to the level of toxins that were on this base. Um, now, everything else in Afghanistan, Iraq was also toxic with the burn pits, and so picture all of the stuff that that regular troops in both those theaters were being exposed to, and then add a few more things to it, and that's what you got with K2. Uh, right down to it. I'll just say right down to because it's out in the public now, but it's right down to yellow cake uranium. That's processed uranium. DoD's not acknowledged that; they're not going to. Um, anyway, there's a number of groups that's kind of been advocating for these K2 vets for a number of years to try to get VA and DoD to acknowledge their individual exposures. They've kept going after the PACT Act because uh, there were a lot of disabilities that these guys are getting that the PACT Act didn't cover. Um, a lot of some cancers that they didn't cover, multi-symptom illnesses, kind of like what you see from the first Gulf War, that they didn't cover. Um, and so, if it was the regular PACT Act cancers, which is a lot of them, this group was covered. But there's a lot of other stuff that this group felt that they were falling through the cracks, and I agree they were. Um, it was depleted uranium. Obviously, that's the only thing that DoD and VA would acknowledge, other than some, um, some other toxins like sludge in the ground. But there was enriched uranium there. So it raises a lot of questions. What the heck is enriched uranium and yellow cake uranium doing on the base? And so, for reasons that I'm sure are legit, DoD doesn't want that cat out of the bag, even though I'm letting it out. It's already been let out, so hopefully no rock eyes will get dropped on my house here. Uh, but when you're breathing that kind of stuff in, yellow cake is dust. So think of breathing processed uranium into your lungs. Uh, Not good. Okay. Uh, and so anyway, these groups advocated for a long time. John Stewart helped them. He helped with the PACT Act. He helped this group afterwards. I helped them to a degree, um, and a lot of good things happened. Never got the acknowledgement of the exposures that we were hoping, but they are adding K2 vets to the group of first Gulf War, basically Gulf War One, so to speak, up to 3.317. I don't want to get too technical. in the regs, but for undiagnosed illnesses and multi-symptom illnesses, which plagued the first Gulf War and plagued Iraq veterans specifically for ever since 1991. Okay, the PACT Act included Afghanistan in the regular Gulf War rules, but it didn't include the K2 group. Okay, so VA has changed, and that rule was done a little while back, but it didn't really get any press. Nobody, a few people wrote about it, but most people don't know about it. So if you get an undiagnosed illness or a multi-symptom illness and you're in K2, that you're going to be qualified under the regular Gulf War rules. But this rule that come out January 10th now presumes service connection for acute leukemias, chronic leukemias, multiple myelomas, myelodysplastic syndromes, and myelofibrosis. Now, they did this based on exposure to particulate matter, or PM 2.5, which is particulate matter that's 2.5 microns or smaller. So it's almost like baby powder. It's dust. I mean, very fine dust and smaller stuff you can't see. So that includes burn pit emissions and any, anything else that was in the environment that's getting kicked up by vehicles, explosions, whatever it may be, whatever makes up that 2.5 micron dust, whatever it is. All right, so it presumes exposure to whatever that stuff is in the dust just by calling it PM 2.5. That's kind of in simplest terms. So, all right, if you were at this location, then we concede you were exposed to this type of PM 2.5, and you're going to get presumptive service connection for these types of cancers, in addition to what PACT Act has already done. So, it's a good change. We would have liked to have seen other things like Parkinson's, things that aren't necessarily cancerous, autoimmune diseases. We would have definitely liked to have seen both of those, Parkinson's and autoimmune diseases, because there's a ton of autoimmune diseases. But even though there's no presumptive for it, those cases can now be claimed under the original Gulf War regulations and statutes for multi-symptom illnesses. It's medically unexplained chronic multi-symptom illness, to be clear, or undiagnosed illnesses. Most of it's going to be the other one. So those can be claimed under those rules, even though it's not a straight out presumptive. That's a complicated set of rules that VA gets wrong a lot, but at least it gives people that are suffering for those types of conditions a fighting chance. It gives them some law to kind of bite into their case with, other than just kind of dangling out there with no real rule or law that says, hey, this is how you get service connection. I don't know if that makes sense the way I explained it, but anyway, this is in effect now, and for all these cancers. Now they made this rule effective for everyone in Iraq, Afghanistan, the first Gulf War from 1990-91. If you've ever served in theater overseas in the global war on terrorism from 91 or from 1990 up to the present, then you're included. In other words, this didn't go in just for the K2 group. It went in for everyone. But the K2 group was the driver for this. This would not have happened, in my opinion, had it not been for the K2 group of vets that kept fighting after the PACT Act to try to get VA to do this. And I can tell you now, VA did it. Okay, the Secretary of VA decided to do this. I can't say the same thing about DOD. I don't think any of this would have happened with DOD would have had their way. Sorry, DOD, but you make VA look like the nice guy on the block.
Never thought you'd say that.
Please don't drop anything on my house.
But this is a big win for the vets, and this is what Kerry has worked so hard on. And he has been working with this administration trying to get them to do this. And, it's over on the 20th next week. And so this was manna from heaven. On the 10th, he said, "Look what just fell." So,
Yeah,
congratulations.
that's a good point, because we were, we were being told that the administration wants to do something, but we also knew the administration was ending
Yes.
soon, and if it didn't happen, who knows? I mean, these guys would have to basically start all over with the new administration, with no guarantee that anything would have anything favorable would have been done for them. So this is right in the skin of the teeth there, in the nick of time they got this in. So uh, I'm glad the secretary did it. I'm glad to have been a small part of it, and and we'll see how it works going forward.
Yeah. I'm glad for the veterans and their family. It's been a long time. So, congratulations, Carrie.
And we've got
Hope
numerous
your
other
house is still
battles.
standing.
We got we got numerous other battles in our in our
We got lots of battles, but when you win one like that, you just have to take a moment and feel good. You just worked hard on that.